guys, welcome back to Storytime with YDRC. This episode, we're going to be continuing to read Warriors, Fire and Ice. Now, last time, we left off right at the beginning of chapter 17, so that's where we're going to start for this episode. So let's get started. Chapter 17. Fireheart stared in horror. Ahead of him, Tiger Claw had reached the limp body and stood looking down at it, his massive shoulders rigid with shock. Fireheart forced himself nearer. Tentatively, he stretched his head forward and sniffed Cinderpaw's flank. She smelled of Thunderpath. One of her hind legs was twisted and glistening with blood. Fireheart was trembling so much he could hardly stand. Then, he saw her side moving. She was still breathing. Speechless with relief, he looked up at Tiger Claw. "She's alive," the deputy growled. He fixed his amber stare on Fireheart. "What was she doing here?" "She came to find you," Fireheart whispered. "You mean you sent her here?" Fireheart's eyes widened with surprise. Did Tiger Claw think he would be so stupid? "I told her to stay in camp," he protested. "She came by herself." "Because I couldn't make her listen to me," he realized with dismay. Tiger Claw snorted. "We must get her home." He bent down with his mouth open, reaching for the small crumpled body. But Fireheart dipped his head and picked up the apprentice by the scruff of her neck before Tiger Claw could touch her. He began to drag Cinderpaw into the woods as gently as he could, her body hanging limply between his front paws. Darkstripe came bounding up to them. I've checked snake rocks again, Tiger Claw. There's no sign of shadow." He broke off when he saw Cinderpaw dangling from Fireheart's mouth. "What happened? What's happened?" Fireheart didn't wait to hear Tiger Claw's answer. He stumbled away through the trees with his precious burden. He could have prevented this accident. If only he'd made Cinderpaw listen to him. If only he'd been a better mentor. Now her body was damaged and bleeding, and she made no sound as she dangled from his jaws. Her hind paws scored a shallow trail through the leaves. As carefully, Fireheart carried her home. Yellowfang was not in her clearing. The two kits with White Cough were called together in the shelter, fast asleep. Fireheart laid Cinderpaw on the cold ground, then made a nest for her in the bracken by circling around and around. When he had finished, she grasped Cinderpaw's scruff and gently pulled her inside. "Fireheart?" Yellowfang meowed from the clearing. Tiger Claw must have told her about Cinderpaw. Fireheart hopped out of the nest. "She's in here," he croaked, feeling weak with relief at seeing the medicine cap. "Let me look," Yellowfang ordered. She brushed past Fireheart and climbed into the bracken to examine Cinderpaw. Fireheart sat down and waited. At last, Yellowfang jumped out. "She's hurt very badly," she meowed, her eyes dark with concern. "But I think I might be able to save her." It was a tiny hope, like a single sparkling dewdrop clinging to his pelt. Fireheart felt it glistening for a moment before Yellowfang went on. "I can't promise anything." She looked deep into Fireheart's eyes and murmured, "Bluestar is very sick, and I can do no more for her. StarClan must decide her fate now." Fireheart felt his eyes cloud with emotion. He could hardly see Yellowfang's face, but he heard her speak to him again, her voice gentle. "Go and sit with Bluestar," she meowed. "She was asking for you earlier. I'll take care of Cinderpaw." Fireheart nodded blindly and turned away. Bluestar had been his mentor, and more than that. There had been a bond between them since their first meeting, but he felt torn. He should be with Cinderpaw too. A shadow loomed at the far end of the fern tunnel. Tiger Claw was sitting at the entrance to Yellowfang's den, with his head held high as usual. Fireheart's shoulders stiffened with anger. Why couldn't the great warrior show some sign of sorrow? After all, Cinderpaw had come looking for him. And for what? There hadn't been any evidence of ShadowClan Freshkill that Fireheart had noticed. He walked past Tiger Claw without a word and headed across the clearing toward Bluestar's den. Longtail was sitting on guard outside. He glanced sideways but didn't try to stop Fireheart as the young warrior pushed through the lichen. Goldenflower, one of the queens, was inside. Fireheart could see her eyes shining in the gloom, and the pale fur of Bluestar lying curled in her nest. Goldenflower leaned forward and gently licked Bluestar's head to cool it, like a mother nursing her kid. Fireheart's heart ached as he thought of Cinderpaw. Would Frostfur be at her daughter's side by now? Yellowfang has given her catnip and feverfew, Goldenflower murmured to Fireheart. We can only watch and wait now. She got to her paws and touched Fireheart's nose with her muzzle. Will you be okay to sit with her? She asked gently. Fireheart nodded, and Goldenflower padded softly out of the den. Fireheart lowered himself onto his belly, stretching his forepaws in front of him so that they just touched his leader's face. He lay very, very still, his eyes fixed on Bluestar's limp body. She didn't have the strength to cough now. Fireheart could hear her breathing in the darkness, shallow and rasping, and he listened to the faltering rhythm as the night slowly passed. Her breathing stopped just before dawn. Fireheart had almost dozed off when he realized the cave was silent. There was no noise from the camp outside either, just a deathly hush, as if the whole clan were holding its breath. Bluestar was completely still. Fireheart knew she was with StarClan, preparing for her remaining life. He had watched Bluestar lose a life before. He felt his fur prickle at the eerie peace that seemed to enfold her body, but there was nothing he could do, so he waited. Suddenly, Bluestar gasped. Fireheart, is that you? She meowed in a croaky voice. Yes, Bluestar, Fireheart murmured. I'm here. I have lost another life. Bluestar's voice was weak, but the relief made Fireheart want to reach forward and lick her between the ears, as Goldenflower had done. When I lose this one, I will not be able to return. Fireheart swallowed hard. The thought of the clan losing its great leader pained him, but the thought of losing his mentor and friend hurt even more. How do you feel? Shall I fetch Yellowfang? Bluestar shook her head slowly. The fever has gone. I am well enough. I just need to rest. Very well, meowed Fireheart. Light was beginning to filter through the lichen, and his head swam from his wakeful night. You must be tired, meowed Bluestar. Go and get some sleep. Yes. Fireheart heaved himself up. His legs felt stiff from lying so long. Is there anything you need? No. Just tell Yellowfang what has happened, answered Bluestar. Thank you for sitting with me. Fireheart tried to purr, but it caught in his throat. There would be more time for words later. He pushed his way out through the lichen. Outside, a harsh brightness made him blink. It had snowed in the night. Fireheart stared in amazement. He had never seen snow before. His two-leg owners had kept him shut inside when he was a very young kid, whenever it was cold. But he'd heard the clan elders talk of it. He nodded to Darkstripe, who had replaced Longtail guarding Bluestar's den, and stepped into the strange powder. It felt wet and cold, crunching loudly under his paws. Tigerclaw was standing in the clearing. It was still snowing, and the flakes settled on the tabby's thick fur without melting. Fireheart could hear him giving orders for the nursery wall to be padded with leaves to keep out the cold. Then I want a hole to be scraped out where we can store prey, the ThunderClan deputy instructed. Use the snow to line it, and cover it with more snow once it has been filled. We may as well make use of the snow while it is here. Warriors raced around Tigerclaw, following his order. Mousefur, Longtail, organize some hunting parties. We need as much fresh kill as we can get before the prey takes to their burrows for good. Tigerclaw spotted Fireheart padding across the clearing. Fireheart, wait, he called. Oh, I suppose you'll have to rest. I can't imagine you'll be any use on the hunting party this morning. Fireheart stared at the Dark Warrior, hostility rising like bile in his throat. I'm going to see how Cinderpaw is first, he growled. Tigerclaw held his gaze for a moment. How's Bluestar? Mistrust ruffled Fireheart's fur like a cold breeze. He'd heard Bluestar lie to Tigerclaw once before about how many lives she had left. "I'm no medicine cat," he answered. "I can't say." Tigerclaw snorted impatiently, then turned away and went back to giving orders. Then Fireheart walked over to Yellowfang's den, relieved to escape the frenetic bustle of the camp. His heart began to pound as he wondered what state he would find Cinderpaw in. "Yellowfang!" he called. "Hush!" Yellowfang sprang from Cinderpaw's bracken nest. "She's sleeping at last. She's had a hard night. I couldn't give her poppy seeds to ease the pain until she'd recovered from the shock." "But she's going to live?" Fireheart's legs felt wobbly with relief. "I can't be sure for a few days. She's hurt inside, and one of her hind legs is badly broken." "But it'll mend, won't it?" Fireheart pleaded desperately. "She'll be training again by New Leaf?" Yellowfang shook her head, her yellow eyes sympathetic. "Fireheart, whatever happens, Cinderpaw will never be a warrior now." Fireheart's head spun. He was dizzy with lack of sleep, and this devastating news sapped the last of his energy. Cinderpaw had been entrusted to him for her warrior training. Memories of the naming ceremony pricked like cruel thorns. Cinderpaw's excitement, Frostfur's motherly pride. "Does Frostfur know?" he meowed, feeling hollow. "Yes, she was here till dawn. She's back in the nursery now, where there are other kids to tend to. I'll ask one of the elders to sit with Cinderpaw. She needs to be kept warm." "I can do that." Fireheart padded over to the nest where Cinderpaw was sleeping and looked inside. She squirmed. Her blood-smeared sides heaved, as though she were fighting a battle as she slept. Yellowfang gently nudged Fireheart with her nose. "You need to get some sleep," she rasped. "Leave Cinderpaw to me." Fireheart stayed where he was. "Bluestar lost another life," he burst out. Yellowfang blinked for a moment, then lifted her head to StarClan. She didn't utter a word, but Fireheart could see anguish in her orange eyes. "You know, don't you?" he murmured. Yellowfang lowered her chin and gazed into his eyes. "That this is Bluestar's final life? Yes, I know. A medicine cat can tell these things." "Will the rest of the clan be able to tell as well?" Fireheart asked, thinking of Tigerclaw. Yellowfang narrowed her eyes. "No. She will be no weaker in this life than she was in any of her others." Fireheart blinked gratefully at her. "Now," Yellowfang ordered, "do you want some poppy seeds to help you sleep?" Fireheart shook his head. Part of him longed for the deep, easy sleep they would bring. But if Tigerclaw was right and ShadowClan really was about to attack ThunderClan's borders, he did not want to dull his senses. He might be needed to defend the camp. Graystripe was back in the warrior's den. Fireheart did not speak to him. His rage at finding him missing the night before lingered like a dull bruise. He padded silently to his nest, circled once, and settled down to a wash. Graystripe looked up. "You're back, then." He sounded edgy, as if he wanted to say more. Fireheart stopped licking his forepaw and stared at Graystripe. "You tried to warn Silverstream off," Graystripe hissed furiously. Willowpelt, who was dozing on the other side of the den, opened one eye, then closed it again. Graystripe lowered his voice. "Stay out of it, will you?" he spat. "I'm going to keep on seeing her, whatever you do or say." Fireheart snorted and flashed a resentful glance at his friend. His talk with Silverstream seemed so long ago, he'd almost forgotten it. But he hadn't forgotten that Graystripe had been missing when he needed help finding Cinderpaw. He laid his head angrily on his muddy forepaws and closed his eyes. Cinderpaw was battling against her injuries, and Bluestar was on her 9th life. As far as Fireheart was concerned, Graystripe could do what he liked. Chapter 18. Graystripe had already left his nest when Fireheart awoke the next day. He could tell it was sun-high by the light that glowed through the branches. He rose, his body still weary with grief, and pushed his head out of the den. Snow must have been falling all morning, for it lay thick on the ground and had drifted against the den. Fireheart found himself gazing out over a white wall that was as high as his shoulder. The usual bustle of the camp seemed muted. Fireheart could see Willowpelt and Halftail whispering on the far side of the clearing. Mousefur was picking her way laboriously toward the store of fresh kill, a rabbit dangling from her jaws. She stopped and sneezed, then carried on. Fireheart lifted one paw and rested it on top of the snow. It felt hard at first, but when he pressed down, the thin covering of ice cracked, and he gasped as his leg plunged into the drift. Fireheart snorted as he found himself up to his muzzle in snow. Shaking his head, lifting his chin, he leaped forward, only to sink into more deep snow. He struggled on, alarm rising in his chest. He felt as if he were drowning in snow. Then, all of a sudden, there was solid ground under his paws. He had reached the edge of the clearing. The snow here was only a mouse-like deep, and Fireheart sat down with a soft crunch, relieved. He tensed when he saw Graystripe plowing through the snow toward him. The gray warrior seemed unbothered by it, protected from its damp chill by his thick pelt. His face was shadowed with sorrow. "Have you heard about Bluestar?" he asked as he neared. "She lost a life to Greencough." Fireheart flicked his ears impatiently. He could have told his friend that last night. "I know," he snapped. "I was with her." "Why didn't you tell me?" mewed Graystripe, shocked. "You weren't exactly in a friendly mood last night, if you remember. Anyway, if you weren't always off breaking the warrior code, you might know what was going on in your own clan," he snarled. Graystripe's ears twitched uncomfortably. "I've just seen Cinderpaw," he meowed. "I'm sorry she's so sick." "How is she?" "She looked bad, but Yellowfang said she's pulling through," replied Graystripe. Fireheart stared anxiously across the clearing and stood up. He wanted to see his apprentice for himself. Graystripe meowed. "She's asleep now. Frostfur's with her, and Yellowfang doesn't want anyone else disturbing her." Fireheart flinched involuntarily. How was he going to tell Frostfur that it was his fault that Cinderpaw went to the Thunderpath? Instinctively, Fireheart turned to Graystripe, seeking reassurance. But Graystripe was trudging across the snowy clearing toward the nursery. "Off to see Silverstream," Fireheart guessed resentfully, sheathing and unsheathing his claws as he watched his friend disappear from sight. Fireheart noticed Speckletail, the oldest queen from the nursery and the mother of one kid with white cough. Only when she stopped right in front of him. "Is Tigerclaw inside?" she asked, pointing with her nose to the warrior's den. Fireheart shook his head. Speckletail mewed. "There's Greencough in the nursery. 2 of Brindleface's kits are sick." "Greencough!" Fireheart gasped, shaken from his anger. "Will they die?" "They might, but Leaf Bear always brings Greencough," Speckletail pointed out gently. "Surely there's something we can do," Fireheart protested. "Yellowfang will do what she can," answered Speckletail, "but in the end, it's up to StarClan." A new flash of fury flared in Fireheart's belly as Speckletail turned away and padded back to the nursery. How could the clan tolerate these tragedies? He felt overwhelmed by the need to leave the camp, to escape the gloomy air that the rest of the clan seemed content to breathe. He jumped up and raced blindly across the snowy clearing, through the gorse tunnel and out into the forest. He was startled to find himself heading instinctively for the training hollow. The thought that he should be there, teaching Cinderpaw, was more than he could bear. As he veered to avoid it, he heard the voices of Whitestorm and Brackenpaw. The white-furred warrior must have taken Brackenpaw for training, while Fireheart had been sleeping. Had no cat stopped to grieve for Bluestar's lost life? Fireheart's throat tightened as he fought back his rage and ran on, desperate to put as much distance as possible between himself and the camp. Finally, he stopped beneath the tall pines, his sides heaving with the effort of running through the snow. There was stillness here that calmed him. Even the birds had stopped singing. Fireheart felt as if he were the only creature in the world. He didn't know where he was going. He just padded on, letting the woods soothe him. As he walked, his mind cleared. He could do nothing for Cinderpaw, and Graystripe was out of reach. But he might be able to help Yellowfang fight the green cough. He would fetch some more catnip. Fireheart turned his steps toward his old kitty pet home, weaving through the brambles in the oak woods that backed into Two Leg Place. He leaped to the top of a fence at the end of his old home, nudging a ridge of snow into the garden below. It fell with a soft clump. Fireheart peered down into the garden. He could see tracks smaller than a cat's. A squirrel had been out hunting for its store of nuts. It didn't take Fireheart long to pluck a generous mouthful of leaves from the catnip bush. He wanted to take as much as he could. Its soft leaves might not survive this weather. This would be his last chance to gather it. With his mouth crammed, Fireheart stared toward the swinging flap he had used as a kid. He wondered if his two-legged housefolk still lived there. They'd been kind to him. He had spent his first leaf bear cosseted in their nest, warm and safe from the cruelties of thunderpaths and greencough. The scent of this catnip must be going to my head, he thought sharply. He bounded up to the garden and onto the fence with a single leap. He was unnerved by how much the thought of his two-legged home had stirred him. Did he really want the safety and predictability of a kitty pet's life? Of course not. Fireheart shook the thought away, but the idea of returning to camp didn't appeal to him yet. Suddenly, he thought of Princess. Fireheart raced along the edge of the woods to the part of Two Leg Place where his sister's garden lay. When her fence was in sight, he dug down through the snow and buried the catnip beneath a layer of dead leaves to protect it from the cold. He was still panting from his run when he leaped onto the fence and called out to Princess. Then he scrambled back down into the woods to wait for her. The snow made his paws ache with cold as he paced restlessly under an oak tree. Perhaps she is kidding, he told himself, or shut inside. He had just persuaded himself he wasn't going to see her today when he heard her familiar mew. He looked up to see her standing on top of her fence. Fireheart felt a shiver of anticipation. Her belly was no longer swollen. Princess must have kidded. He breathed in her scent as she approached and felt it warm him. You've kidded, he meowed. Princess gently touched his nose with hers. Yes, she meowed softly. Did it go okay? Are the kids all right? Princess purred. It was fine. I have 5 healthy kids, she meowed, her eyes glowing with pleasure. Fireheart licked her head and she mewed. I didn't expect to see you out in this weather. I came to find some catnip, Fireheart told her. There's greencough in the camp. Princess's eyes clouded with worry. Are many of your clan ill? 3 so far. Fireheart hesitated for a moment, then meowed sadly. Our leader lost another life last night. Another life? Echoed Princess. What do you mean? I thought it was only an old she-cat's tale that cats have 9 lives. Bluestar was granted 9 lives by StarClan because she's leader of our clan, Fireheart explained. Princess looked at him in awe. Then it's true! Only for clan leaders. The rest of us have only 1 life, like you, and like Cinderpaw. Fireheart's voice trailed away. Cinderpaw? Princess must have detected the grief in his voice. Fireheart gazed into her eyes, and the thoughts that had been troubling him began to tumble out. My apprentice, he meowed. She was hit on the thunder path last night. His voice cracked as he remembered finding her broken, bleeding body. She's badly hurt. She might still die, and even if she survives, she'll never become a warrior. Princess moved closer and nuzzled him. You spoke so fondly of her last time you were here, she mewed. She sounded full of fun and energy. The accident shouldn't have happened, Fireheart growled. I was supposed to meet Tiger Claw. He'd asked for Bluestar, but Bluestar was ill, so I offered to go instead. I had to fetch catnip first, and Cinderpaw went in my place. Princess looked alarmed, and Fireheart added quickly. I told her not to, but perhaps if I'd been a better mentor, she'd have listened to me. I'm sure you're a good mentor, Princess tried to soothe him. but Fireheart hardly heard her. I don't know why Tiger Claw wanted Blue Star to meet him in such a dangerous place, he spat. He said there was evidence that ShadowClan had invaded our territory, but when I arrived there was no scent of them at all. Was it a trap? Princess suggested. Fireheart looked into his sister's questioning eyes and suddenly began to wonder. Why would Tiger Claw want to hurt Cinderpaw? It was Blue Star he asked for, Princess pointed out. Fireheart's fur bristled. Could his sister be right? Tiger Claw had summoned Blue Star to the narrowest part of the Thunderpath verge. Surely even Tiger Claw wouldn't deliberately put his clan leader in danger. Fireheart shook the thought away. I don't know, he stammered. Everything's so confusing at the moment. Even Graystripe's hardly speaking to me. Why? Fireheart shrugged. It's too complicated to explain. Princess nestled next to him in the snow, pressing her soft fur against his. I just feel like such an outsider at the moment, Fireheart went on gloomily. It's not easy being different. Different? Princess looked puzzled. Being born a kitty pet, when other cats are all clan-born. You seem like a clan-born cat to me, mewed Princess. Fireheart blinked gratefully at her. She went on. But if you're not happy in the clan, you can always come home with me. My housefolk would look after you, I'm sure. Fireheart pictured himself living his old kitty pet life, warm, cozy, and safe. But he couldn't forget how he'd watched the woods from his two-legged garden and dreamed of being out in the forest. A breeze stirred his thick fur and carried the scent of a mouse to his nose. Fireheart shook his head firmly. Thank you, Princess, he meowed, but I belong with my clan now. I could never be happy in a two-legged nest. I would miss the scents of the forest, and sleeping beneath silver pelts, hunting my own food and sharing it with my clan. His sister's eyes gleamed. It sounds like a good life, she purred. She looked down shyly at her paws. Sometimes even I stare into the forest and wonder what it feels like to live out there. Fireheart purred and stood up. Then you understand? Princess nodded. Are you going back now? Yes, I must take the catnip to Yellowfang while it's fresh. Princess stretched her head forward to press her muzzle to his side. Perhaps my kids will be strong enough to meet you next time you come, she meowed. Excitement tingled in Fireheart's belly. I hope so, he meowed. As he turned to leave, Princess called, Take care, brother. I don't want to lose you again. You won't, Fireheart promised. Good thinking, Fireheart, purred Whitestorm. He had seen Fireheart pad back into camp with his jaws crammed with catnip. Fireheart's mouth had been watering all the way home. Although he was beginning to think he'd be happy never to see another catnip bush again, but he was happier than when he'd left the camp. His sister had safely hidden, and his head felt clear. He was heading toward Yellowfang's den when Tiger Claw appeared at his side. More catnip? Observed the great tabby, his eyes suspicious. I wondered where you'd gone. Brackenpaw can take that to Yellowfang. Brackenpaw was helping to clear away the snow nearby. Come and take this catnip to Yellowfang, Tiger Claw ordered the apprentice. Brackenpaw nodded and bounded over at once. Fireheart dropped the bunch of leaves onto the ground. I wanted to visit Cinderpaw, he meowed to Tiger Claw. Later, growled the deputy. He waited while Brackenpaw picked up the catnip and carried it off to Yellowfang's den. Then he turned back to Fireheart. I want to know where Graystripe has been going. Fireheart felt the heat rising under his fur. I don't know, he replied, holding Tiger Claw's gaze. Tiger Claw stared back at him, his eyes cold and hostile. When you see him, he hissed, you can tell him he's confined to the fallen oak. Yellowfang's old den? Fireheart glanced at the tangled branches where the medicine cat had lived when she first came into the ThunderClan camp, when she was still considered a ShadowClan outcast. Swiftpaw was there, lying beside Speckletail's dark tabby kit. Cats with white cough are confined there until they are well again. But Graystripe only has a cold, Fireheart protested. A cold is bad enough. He'll stay at the fallen oak, Tigerclaw repeated. Cats with green cough are to nest with Yellowfang. We must stop this sickness from spreading. The deputy's eyes flashed unsympathetically. Fireheart wondered if he thought of illness as a sign of weakness. It is good for the clan, Tigerclaw added. Yes, Tigerclaw, I'll tell Graystripe. And keep away from Bluestar, the deputy warned. But the green cough has left her, Fireheart objected. I am aware of that, but her den still reeks of the sickness. I can't afford to have any of my warriors falling ill. Whitestorm tells me that RiverClan warriors have been scented even closer to the camp. He also told me he had to train Brackenpaw today. I expect you to take charge of Brackenpaw's training tomorrow. Fireheart nodded. May I go and see Cinderpaw now? Tigerclaw looked at him. I doubt if Yellowfang has put her anywhere near the cats with green cough. Fireheart added with a flash of irritation. I won't get infected. Very well, Tigerclaw agreed, and stalked away. Fireheart met Brackenpaw in the middle of the clearing. Yellowfang was very grateful for the catnip, Brackenpaw mewed. Good, answered Fireheart. By the way, I'm teaching you how to catch birds tomorrow. I hope you're ready for a bit of tree climbing. Brackenpaw's whiskers twitched excitedly. Definitely. I'll meet you at the training hollow. Fireheart nodded and carried on to Yellowfang's den. He spotted Brindleface's poor kids straight away. They lay quietly in a bracken nest, coughing, their noses and eyes streaming. Yellowfang greeted him. Thanks for the catnip. We're going to need it. But Patchpelt has green cough now. She gestured with her nose toward another nest in the bracken. Inside, Fireheart could see the old Tom's matted black and white fur. How's Cinderpaw? He asked, looking back at the medicine cat. Yellowfang sighed. She was awake earlier, but not for long. She has an infection in her leg. StarClan knows. I've tried everything, but she must fight this one herself. Fireheart peered into Cinderpaw's nest. The little gray cat was twitching in her sleep, her injured leg twisted awkwardly to one side. Fireheart shuddered, suddenly afraid she might yet lose this struggle. He turned back to Yellowfang, looking for words of encouragement, but the medicine cat sat with her head low. She looked exhausted. Do you think Spotted Leaf would have been able to save these cats? She meowed unexpectedly, raising her head to meet his gaze. Fireheart shivered. He could still sense Spotted Leaf's presence here in the clearing. He remembered how efficiently she'd tended to Ravenpaw's shoulder wound after the battle with RiverClan, and how carefully she'd advised him about caring for Yellowfang when the old she-cat had first come to the ThunderClan camp. Then he looked at Yellowfang. Her shoulders weighed down with experience. I'm sure there's nothing Spotted Leaf would have done differently, he told her. One of the kits cried out and Yellowfang sprang up. As she passed, Fireheart leaned forward and gently stroked the old cat's side with his muzzle. She twitched her shoulder gratefully at him. Then, filled with sadness, he turned and padded toward the fern tunnel. The white pelt of frost fur appeared at the other end. She must be coming to see Cinderpaw. As he approached the queen, Fireheart lifted his head and looked into her blue eyes. The sorrow in them made his heart twist with pain. Frostfur, he began. The queen stopped. I'm sorry. Fireheart trembled as he spoke. Frostfur looked confused. What for? I should have been able to stop Cinderpaw from going to the Thunderpath. Frostfur gazed at him, but her expression gave away nothing except her sadness. I don't blame you, Fireheart, she murmured. Then she lowered her head and carried on toward her kit. Graystripe was back, munching a vole beside the nettle clump. Fireheart padded over to him. Tigerclaw says you've got to move to the fallen oak with the white cough cats, he meowed. With a prickle of resentment, he remembered how the deputy had questioned him about his friend. That won't be necessary, replied Graystripe cheerfully. I'm better now. Yellowfang gave me the all clear this morning. Fireheart looked closely at Graystripe. His eyes were certainly bright again, and his runny nose had dried to an unappealing crust. At any other time, Fireheart would have teased him about how much he looked like Running Nose, the shadow-clad medicine cat. Now he spat crossly. Tiger Claw has noticed your disappearances. You should be more careful. Why can't you stay away from Silverstream, at least for now? Graystripe stopped chewing and stared angrily back at Fireheart. And why can't you mind your own business? Fireheart closed his eyes and snorted with frustration. Would he ever get through to his friend? Then he wondered if he even cared anymore. After all, Graystripe hadn't asked about Cinderpaw. Fireheart's stomach growled to tell him he was hungry. He might as well eat. He took a sparrow from the pile of fresh kill and carried it away to a deserted corner of the camp to eat alone. As he settled down, he thought of Princess, far away in Two-Leg Place with her newborn kids. Lonely and anxious, Fireheart stared across the camp and longed to see her again. Alright guys, so that's where we're going to end off for this episode of Warriors, Fire, and Ice. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. That's it. Bye guys!